The brand new NX. There are multiple trim levels for this to cover. However, we have the 350, which with the luxury package here maxes out around $51,000, which is a lot of money. But this starts around 42 grand, and depending on what you want, you can pretty much get it from different options in terms of seat colors. We have the red option here, which gives you a ton of flair. You have the F Sport trim level, which gives you more of that sporty look. But the big changes here are to the exterior and interior. The exterior is far less aggressive than it used to be. There's way less going on here, with the exception of the enormous front end. They still carry that over, and again, this is skewed more towards a younger demographic. And the back half of this also looks more cohesive. They're using the light bar in the back, much like we first saw in the UX. So this is kind of their forward vision of what they're trying to do with new models. The big changes are in the interior. And when I say big changes, it's not just the panels, plastic material choices, it's technology, which is something that has been a thorn in this brand's side, Toyota and Lexus. So let's start with seating comfort. It's quite good. Honestly, you never complain about a Lexus seat, and I think they find a good balance between bolstering and comfort. Adjustability is also good. If you're short and you're smaller, you can get way up on the steering wheel like in your chest, essentially. If you're bigger, you still fit comfortably. There's enough forward and aft movement in the seat. The material choice is pretty good. There's high contrast matte textures and kind of low glare dashboard. There's some contrasting stitching here. And of course, the armrests are supremely padded and your knee areas are padded as well. All well designed. Your storage areas are good, and the door panels, the cup holder design. You have a sliding phone tray here with a wireless charger that opens up to a cavern for extra storage for like sunglasses and all that. I don't think you're going to complain about the storage in here for a vehicle of this size. The technology has been greatly improved. That's because they've done an internal American design infotainment and technology package. The screen is bigger. The infotainment has been changed to a Linux-based operating system, which gives them the ability to scale it across multiple vehicles of multiple application types, from trucks, SUVs to sports cars, and they can change screen, they can change resolution, they can change functionality based on what the designers want, either buttons, physical buttons everywhere, or if they want to go to all touch, they can do that here. And the best part about the infotainment is it's extraordinarily fast. But since we're in a pre-production car, there's little bugs here and things that don't work particularly well. Like if you're in Apple CarPlay and you try to do voice commands, when the music's playing, the music continues to play in the background. There's little things like that that are going to be fleshed out in, of course, over-the-air updates, which is the primary function of this system, being able to constantly update it and patch out bugs simply over the air, not bring it into the dealership, which was, again, a problem with the previous generation products. HVAC controls here are mixed. You have physical rotary knobs for your temperature, which don't feel the most high quality, feel very plasticky. And you do have physical controls for volume and your defroster selections. But everything else, like seat heaters and all that, is all relegated to the touchscreen. There's other pieces of technology they've added. The gauge cluster is all new, and they have added capacitive touch on the steering wheels. But before you get bent out of shape, they're still physical. There's detents to select things. So you have the menu buttons, which are multifunction here, which you can see on the HUD. When you kind of touch over it, it shows you the menu. And then when you want to select it, you push it. So it's a great, clever use of technology without being gimmicky. So the whole point of these control structures is not to get stuck using it one simple way. As they can update technology, these buttons can be scaled out as they add more menus or features. So the steering wheel buttons, you don't have buttons that are changed on one car to the other. This is the point about technology. It has to be smart, it has to be scalable, and it has to be designed for long-term use, which you can tell that that's what they did here. Backseat space is about what you expect from the previous generation car. It's equally as comfortable. The adjustability is good in the back. And the hatch space is okay. Again, it's in line with what is in this price range and category of SUV. But I think we're going to talk about most of the technical stuff about the NX in the shop. So let's head there now. Underneath the brand new NX jack, this looks largely familiar to what we've seen before in other products like the Avalon Camry RAV4, and that's because it's on TNGA-K, a shared architecture that they can scale out for different products of different types, From hybrids to plug-in hybrids to gasoline-powered engines, from luxury products to non-luxury products.
And this car, unlike, say, the RAV4, which this is pretty largely similar to.
It looks almost identical in many ways.
Yeah. But you get a gajillion different trim levels and option packages, and honestly, you basically need a degree from Lexus because you can get a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, you can get the 350s, which is the car we have, turbocharged 4-cylinder, which is all new, you can get the hybrid drivetrain, and you can get the plug-in hybrid drivetrain, which is the fastest, most expensive version of this. This can also be all-wheel drive, which is an on-demand system found on the 250 and 350. You can get an all-wheel drive system, or you can get this front-wheel drive. Because this is a 350 and the way it's been configured here, you have the on-demand system with the turbocharged 4-cylinder, which again is all new. It is a single turbo and it is port and direct injected. It makes a little bit over 270 horsepower and over 300 foot-pounds of torque, which makes this pretty quick. It has a lot of low-down torque, which is what you want in a car like this.
Absolutely. And with the Lexus mindset, these are developed separately from Toyota products. So while it has the same architecture as the RAV4, there's different strategies in terms of NVH materials. You see wheel well coverings are different, undercoatings around pinch welds are different. These covering panels are different in different materials. You have dimpled front panels. This is all to reduce noise, wind noise and road noise, and of course, to reduce the amount of drag from this car to make it more slippery. There's other things that they do in terms of suspension damping, tuning, bushing design. This car has a strut front, multi-link back, but they also do use aluminum knuckles all the way around. So there's this mixed material mentality, and also in combination with that, you get different tire wheel packages, different brakes. So they are really trying to differentiate it here, make it feel like a more luxury product without completely bending you over when it comes time to service it.
Yes.
Still tried and true parts aren't horrifically expensive.
It's a Toyota or Lexus underneath.
Yes.
The value, where your extra money is going, is making this a more quiet, comfortable, luxury car experience. One thing that is unique to the NX is the F-Sport packages. While you do not get a TVD rear diff like the Toyota Adventure models in the Limited, you do get adaptive dampers, which are only found on the F-Sport variants of this car. So you can make it stiffer, you can make it softer, you name it.
And the F-Sport package also does some transmission retuning.
Yes.
And changes some things like the gauge cluster. That's something they're always trying to do, add a little bit, like 10% more edge or sportiness to it, however you want to call it.
Speaking of transmissions, you get a couple. You get the traditional 8-speed automatic, which is great because it's not a CVT, or you get a CVT if you get the hybrid variant. So pick your poison.
Let's take this for a drive, Jack, and there's going to be more trim levels that we're going to cover in the future. We'll get into further, more technical detail and drill down a bit.
I can't wait for more NX videos, Mark.
Let's do it.
We're in a pre-production NX, Mark. This is the NX350 with the luxury package, but not the F-Sport. This is their new turbocharged 4-cylinder. It does have an 8-speed automatic. Does not have a TVD. So let's launch this thing. You hear that fake engine noise, Mark?
Barely. At least from the passenger side, I don't hear much. It's first thing is, if you're going to compare this to the previous generation NX, it is way more responsive. Transmission, engine is quicker. It doesn't feel as much of like an eco, like 4-cylinder as the old one did.
And this drivetrain does not feel like you're in a RAV4 either. It's
right.
Way more powerful.
Yeah, it doesn't have the rattle factor of the old car or some of the Toyota 4-cylinders. So that's a huge step up. And I think that was one of my biggest complaints about the previous NX. It just felt very budget.
This, I think, does a good job feeling more expensive than the RAV4. As someone whose significant other drives a RAV4 every single day, she has a 2020, and this feels significantly more expensive. But I do think in its ride quality, day in and day out, at least with this car without adaptive dampers, it doesn't feel all that premium, particularly when you compare it against a Q5, which it is directly priced against, and the BMW X3 or the GV70 from Genesis.
Yeah, it doesn't have the really strong sense of isolation. And granted, right now it's very difficult to tell in our drive segment because it's very windy. We're getting into that fall, like winter stage, so it's always noisy out. It's a quiet cabin. It really is. It's a very isolated cabin, but the ride quality, I think, they've tried to find some balance between a little bit of responsiveness, like where you get confidence of driving.
Good body control.
Good body control, but I think the sacrifice of the overall like smoothness of like the Audi.
Yeah, and the other sticking point against this, when it's compared against specifically the GV70 and the BMW X3, is it's not a rear-wheel drive architecture.
Right. That's going to be, and this is something we talked about with Mazda products.
Yes.
Mazda's got so good, like the Mazda 6 and the CX-5, they got to this level where they couldn't overcome the front-wheel drive aspect of it. No matter what they did with that on-demand all-wheel drive system, no matter how they programmed it, no matter how balanced out they did it, it still feels front-wheel drive-ish, and it kind of removes some of the premium, like, luxury feel, and this is the NX's problem for me. Unlike the RX, where that is also front-wheel drive, I think they have the longer wheelbase, it feels more substantial. This just feels, more
Cheap.
I mean, it's not cheap, but it has that sense, that like 10-15%, that tangible part. And I don't know that most people are going to notice that.
And you see a lot of the rear-wheel drive benefits at limited handling. And let's be honest, if you're driving an NX, you're doing this.
Yes,
you're doing 30, 40, 55 miles an hour, sitting in traffic. You want an isolated cabin, and it does an okay job,
Yes,
in my opinion.
Does. It does an okay job. And we talked about the interior space a lot during the interior part, so I've already talked about the deficiencies there. The only other thing from a driving perspective, I think there's two things that I noticed. One is there is, much like the RAV4 did this to me too, there is this strange transition between like the front end and the rear. I don't know if a torque vectoring differential would fix that for this car, and granted, most people probably don't care about that.
And we're not in the F Sport. We're not in the most expensive variant in this, and we haven't driven the hybrid NX, which is apparently the most desirable version of this vehicle and the most powerful. But I think as a product that a lot of people are going to be buying, its advantages are because it's based on a RAV4 underneath. You should have lower running costs than you would, say, in a BMW or an X3, but what you are losing is that extra, I think, 10% of luxury. And I think if you are comparing this to something like an ES, I think they have a big missed opportunity. The ES feels expensive.
Yes, it does. And, again, we talked about that on the interior part, and a lot of this car's specialness feels lost here in this next generation design. And I think some of the driving character also is lost a little bit here. The refinement is a little bit off.
The ES is such a good cruiser that you can forget about the fact that it's not a BMW 3
Which is
Series
down the
or
same
A4.
architecture as this car. So there's a lot of things about that car that are missing here.
Because it is expensive. The one we're in is over $50,000.
That's insane.
You're going to price shop it against a GV70, a BMW X3,
and
a Q5.
And you know what? I have my personal feelings about Hyundai as a brand and some of the things that they've done, good and bad. You get out of a GV70 and you drive their upper trim level compared to this, it is an extraordinarily hard sell getting in here. That does a lot of the things that they're trying to attempt to do here in modernization, like younger buying demographic, and I think they do it a lot better in the GV70. In terms of ride isolation, driving prowess as well, because it's a rear-wheel drive architecture, this is a product that I feel very mixed on, Jack.
Yeah, I will say before we get on the final thoughts, because we did not touch on this, is all the inputs are exactly what you expect from a Toyota product. They're all good. The brake pedal feels decent. Your steering is more or less a 1-to-1, and the 8-speed automatic is very similar to what you felt before. It's not as fast as a CF, but it does a good job for most people.
I think we can cover most of that in the final thoughts, Jack, so let's head there now.
All right. Final thoughts on the Lexus NX350. Honestly, despite our sour tone in this video, this is far from a bad car. And if you're coming from the prior generation NX, you're probably gonna really like this thing. It's, for the most part, a far more upscale product. You have better drivetrains, the interior has been improved, and you have leagues better interior technology, both in the safety suite and the MMI system as a whole. However, honestly, I feel like the NX is a bit of a missed opportunity. If you look at something like the Lexus ES, which is leagues better than something like a Camry when it comes to the interior space, the quietness, the ride quality, and the audio system, This NX, when compared to something like a Toyota Venza, which we have as a long-term tester, is no quieter, to be honest. It doesn't ride much better, and really all you're getting is a more luxurious cabin, which, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just a little disappointing with how strong the ES is. And when you compare this product against things like the BMW X3, the Audi Q5, the new GV70 from Genesis, which is excellent, and the Acura RDX, it finds itself in a position of not being terribly competitive, at least in my mind. That said, the advantage of a Lexus compared to a German car is you get a much, much better residual, theoretically at least, and lower running costs. Not to mention the fact that the dealer experiences at Lexus are quite excellent, at least historically. So with that said, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.